to CrossPoint Online. I'm Shay Bizzotti,
And I'm Lexi.
and we are so happy that you joined us this morning. If you're a first time guest, just let us know in the comments, or you can do it on the app. There's a website, but it's too many words for me, so just use the app. Um,
If you are wanting to share the stream, we have a goal of 25 shares today. So
yes.
help us out. I think they can do it. What do you think?
I think so, and I think because you did this just like last second.
Yeah.
We should really see if this share can beat more than first service.
Oh, yeah.
Because, share some love because
25
anyways.
shares. And if we do above and beyond, it's even better.
Right, because you never know who it might reach, and you don't know that today might be the day that they take the time to do it because it's a long weekend, so we've got time to actually rest. So
Yes.
it's cool. Just share.
If you're interested in signing up for a group, it's that time of the year. So we have small groups for literally anything. A running
Right.
group. I'm not going to be in that group, so
But we'll cheer you on. Like,
And
let us know
yes.
that you're in it.
And if you want to sign up, you can do that through the app or crosspointonline.net/groups.
Oh, see, she's good. And I would have
See,
been
I know that stuff.
See, I already tried up here earlier. I was like, my old lady eyes aren't going to let me read this. So, anyways, I'm so happy you did that. I say app. Use the app because it has everything. And then Andy and I do a group. So, if you're interested in that, let us know. Just reach out some way. So, we'd love to see you. And we're going to celebrate Best Sunday Ever. And I was in first service. So, I'm so excited for next week because
Oh, yes.
the ending was anyways,
It's-
it just left you just wanting
it
to
does,
like
yes.
Sunday to hurry up and
You'll
get here.
you'll get a little preview of a pretty interesting video for next Sunday. I
Right,
would
the
say.
giggles at the end
Yes.
just make you want to know
Yes.
what was happening.
Oh, if
Well,
you want to know.
It was a very well played video,
Yes.
so whoever made that, good job. And so, anyways, Best Sunday Ever is always a big deal. I heard something about like a breakfast bar.
Oh yeah, we have like a biscuit bar. Don't know what that entails. It sounds like carbs, so that's good with me.
I'm gonna say biscuits.
I mean, carbs is fine.
So-
Anything with carbs is the
'cause
best.
I'm one of those that gets like a biscuit and gravy order, but I get jelly too, so I
Oh,
get
yeah.
half the biscuit with the gravy and half.
You need the
with
full
jelly.
experience.
Right? So I like a
Yes.
little salty and sweet. So I'm
Yes.
excited about biscuits.
And
So,
just go
for this
ahead and
next week.
and sit back, enjoy the service.
Well, good morning, everyone. How we doing this morning? Good to see you. Well, we're so glad you're here with us, whether you're in the room, online, or with us in East End. We're just so glad to have you with us here today. Obviously, as a worship leader, one of my favorite things about church is that we get to stand here and sing together and worship together every morning. So I invite you guys to stand and sing as we offer up an offering of praise to God this morning and worship together. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails is working to fail me now. You won't fail me now in the waiting. The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy for all my days. Lord, yes, I will. I count on one thing. The same God that never fails will not fail me now. You won't fail me now in the way The same God who's never late is working all things out. You're working all things out. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy for all my days. Lord, yes, I will for all my days. Lord, yes, I will, and I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. I choose to praise, to glorify the name of all names. Nothing can stand against. Yes, I will lift you high in the lowest valley. And yes, I will bless your name. Yes, I will sing for joy when my heart is heavy for all my days. Lord, yes, I will for all my days. Lord, yes, I will for all my days. Lord, yes, I will. Amen. Let's celebrate it this morning. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord, 'cause it's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Sing these together. You give life. You give light. You are love. You bring light to the darkness. You give hope. You restore every heart that is broken. And great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs. So we pour out our praise to you only. Come on, let's sing it. All the earth. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise. We pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Great are you, Lord. Great are you, Lord. Man, thank you so much for singing with me this morning. We invite you guys to go ahead and be seated here today.
In Maysville, Augusta, on the East End, or online. We're happy you're here. If you're a first-time guest, on the back of your seat, there is a little card that you can fill out and put in the boxes at the doors whenever you leave. Or you could also download the CrossPoint Now app and click First-Time Guest on there. Next Sunday is a big Sunday. It's September 10th, our church's anniversary. It's the best Sunday ever. We'll be having services from 9:30 and 11:30, and there's a lot of stuff going on. One of those is the breakfast bar. It's going to be biscuits, so you guys show up for that. And then we'll have the Zorb experience. We've talked about it a couple weeks now, and you'll get a sneak peek of that later, so stay tuned for that. And then we'll also have, it's just a great time to invite somebody to join the church and to worship with us, experience what a relationship with Christ is like. A lot of people, we've got a lot of sign-ups for small group, but you can still sign up now. There's groups for everybody, men, women. You can do a group online. There's running groups. If you like to eat, everybody likes to eat. There's a group for you. So sign up on the CrossPoint Now app, or you can sign up at the welcome table as well. God calls us to serve, and we need your help as a church to fill some spots. Otherwise, I will be singing on the worship team, and there's a reason why I'm up here opening and not on the worship team. So if you're musically inclined, speak with Eli, sign up on the app or at the welcome table again, and he'd love to coach you up, and he will help you to succeed. And then we could, or if you're not musically inclined, you can be a door greeter, and that's a great way to connect with our church and get your name out there. And then also the refreshments and the coffee and donuts and stuff like that. We need some help with that. Kid XP, we need some volunteers for Kid XP. Can we just give a round of applause for the people and volunteers at Kid XP? It's a big job for them. And Pastor Katie and everybody along with that does a great job with that. So I'm excited to bring up Pastor Katie today. She is going to be leading us in the sermon. So if you guys will, while she's coming up, stand up and greet somebody next to you.
All right. Well, good morning. It's great to see everybody greeting each other, especially this holiday week. I know that a lot of us have either started school or you've gotten your kids to go back to school this week, and so we're excited that you're spending this Labor Day weekend with us. I was talking with Chad this past week, and he said, Katie, I'm excited for you to preach today because I think you bring a different perspective. And at first I said, thank you, and then I thought, I wonder what he means by that. And so if this is your first time here, typically our Sunday morning message is brought to you by our lead pastor, Chad Current. And if you don't know him, he's a male, and let's just say he's a different generation than my own. So I figured that maybe that's the perspective he's talking about. And one thing that I was thinking that my generation is really known for is social media. So I'm 25 years old, and for over half of my life, social media has been a big part of it. I love to keep in contact with friends and family that are far away. I love to share funny things that are happening in my life. But if I'm being honest, I think one of the most fun aspects of social media is the different filters that you can play with when you're posting a picture. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, oftentimes when you're ready to post a picture or share it with your friends, you can kind of distort the reality of what your picture looks like. Sometimes that's in a positive way, sometimes it's in a silly way, sometimes it makes it look worse. And I was actually overhearing some of the ladies this morning in the lobby, and one said, hey, I saw your picture on Facebook this week, I didn't even recognize you. And she said, girl, that's because I look 20 years younger with this filter on. So I think whether you have kids or you're on social media, filters are fun to play with. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, I figured I'd show you an example. So this is me writing my sermon. This is with a positive filter on. Makes me look a little tanner than usual. Clears up the spots on my face. It gives me some digital makeup. It looks all right. Then if you... This is often what negative filters can do to our reality. It exaggerates what we really look like. It kind of accentuates the bad parts and the spots on our faces, and really just makes us look ridiculous. But I was thinking about why we use these filters, and sometimes it's just for fun, to make a joke. But a lot of times, I think it's because we want to come across differently than the picture actually looks. Sometimes we look at ourselves and we focus on the negative, so we want to use a filter to make it look better. And so I was reading a study recently that said men in general are more likely to look in the mirror and focus on the positives, whereas women in general are more likely to look in the mirror and focus on the negatives. So according to this study, men look in the mirror and they say, man, my hair looks good today, or going to the gym is really paying off. Whereas women look in the mirror and they say, man, I really liked this shirt, but it's starting to make my arms look big. Or do you see the size of the pimple on my face? Or how bad my hair looks today? And while I don't want to speak for all the women listening here, or any of the men, I think just this one study shows us that at least half of our population looks at ourselves and we focus on the negative. We tend to look at ourselves and focus on where we lack, where we're weak, and where we're wrong. Is this sounding familiar to anyone? I think, unfortunately, most of us listening have looked at ourselves in this way at some point in our lives. And so I'm excited to share one of my favorite Bible stories today because I think this is about a man named Gideon who probably looked at himself in this same way. I think when we look at ourselves through this negative filter, sometimes it's hard to read the Bible because when we read, we think, I am nothing like the person that I'm reading about. Like, I'll read the story of Daniel and think, man, I love God, but I'm not willing to go as far as he did, to go against everything the government told him and to end up in a pit of lions. Or I'll read the story of John and I'll think, I love Jesus, but I don't know if I could follow him as well as John did, who he followed him as far as to be put to death for his faith. And I think when we look at ourselves in this negative filter, we tend to focus on our weakness and think, I don't think this person is really anything like me. But the story of Gideon that I'm going to share today is a little different because he looks at himself in the same way that oftentimes we do when we focus on our negatives. So just to tell you a little bit about Gideon, a little background, he's from the smallest tribe of Israel. And so the Bible tells us that for the past 7 years, Gideon and his tribe have been hiding in terror from their enemies. So they'd move from camp to camp, just trying to survive against all these attacks from their enemies. On top of that, Gideon he's called the least in his family. So while all of his brothers were out trying to defend themselves from the enemies, he was inside, he was feeding the animals, he was harvesting the food, and he was doing the housework. So even according to the culture at the time, Gideon was seen as less than because he couldn't even be out fighting with the other men. Gideon was often overlooked in social settings as well, yet God takes the time to meet him face to face. So this is where we pick up in Judges chapter 6. The angel of the Lord appeared to him and said, "Mighty hero, the Lord is with you." "Sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all of this happened to us? And where are all the miracles our ancestors told us about? Didn't they say, 'The Lord brought us up out of Egypt'? But now the Lord has abandoned us and handed us over to the Midianites." Then the Lord turned to him and said, "Go with the strength you have and rescue Israel from the Midianites. I am sending you." "But Lord," Gideon replied, "how can I rescue Israel? My clan is the weakest in the tribe of Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family." The Lord said to him, "I will be with you, and you will destroy the Midianites as if you were fighting against one man." So right from the start of this story, we see that God not only takes the time to meet Gideon where he is, but he invites him to save all of his people after they've been in years of terror and hiding from their enemies. He chooses Gideon to lead the Israelites out of the hands of the Midianites, something that he could have chosen a mighty warrior with a lot of experience to do. But instead, he asks Gideon, who tends to focus on his weaknesses. And Gideon, in response, questions God. We continue in verse 17. Gideon replied, "If you are truly going to help me, show me a sign to prove that it is really the Lord speaking to me. Don't go away until I come back and bring my offering to you." He answered, "I will stay here until you return." The angel of the Lord stays there, just as Gideon asks. But that is not enough for him. Instead, he asks for multiple signs to see if God is being serious. First, to see if this is really God that he's talking to. And second, to see, does God really mean to talk to me? The first sign wasn't enough, so he asks for another. And God comes through. The second sign wasn't enough, so he asks for another. And finally, he asks God for a miracle. Then Gideon said to God, "If you are truly going to use me to rescue Israel as you promised, prove it to me in this way. I will put a wool fleece on the floor. And if the fleece is wet with dew in the morning and the ground is dry, then I will know that you are going to help me rescue Israel as you promised." And that is just what happened. When Gideon got up the next morning, he squeezed the fleece out and wrung out a bowl full of water. Then Gideon said to God, "Please don't be angry with me, but let me make one more request. Let me use the fleece for one more test. This time, let the fleece remain dry, and the ground around it will be wet with dew." So that night, God did as Gideon asked. The fleece was dry in the morning, but the ground was covered with dew. Now, I like this story because I think, kind of like what I mentioned with Daniel and John, sometimes we read Bible stories and God gives them an amazing challenge, and the person, just like you and me, just says, yes, I'm going to go, and they do it, and the story's over. But Gideon is real to me in asking, are you sure you want me to do this? Like, I have no prior experience in going into battle. He expresses his worries, his doubts, and his questions. He looks at God and says, if you're being serious and you really want me to do this, I'm going to put my blanket here on the ground. If it's wet in the morning and the ground underneath it is dry, then I'll know that you actually mean to talk to me. Now, if you've ever been to a science class, according to our human standards, this would be impossible because water travels. So if the blanket is wet and it's on the ground, eventually the ground's going to get wet. But God works this small miracle for one person to prove that he was going to be with Gideon and that this challenge was legit for him. But even though Gideon said that you mean to talk to me, that still wasn't enough. He says, that was too easy, God. Let's just do one more test. We'll reverse it. So in the morning, I want the ground to be wet and the blanket to be dry. So he goes to bed, and again, as God does, he works a miracle. The blanket is dry and the ground is wet. So Gideon has now asked for 4 different signs from God. And he's finally starting to believe that God really wants him to lead this army. He wants him to be a mighty warrior and save Israel with no prior experience. God invites Gideon to be a part of something bigger than himself. And in this invitation, Gideon begins to doubt. He starts to ask, what happens if I'm not good enough? What if I mess up? Or what if I can't lead these people in the way God wants me to? In God's invitations, I think we often focus on our own weakness. But in God's invitations, he works miracles so that we can see his strength. I think when God invites us to do amazing things too, we tend to focus on what's going to become of that invitation, when we need to realize that sometimes God works miracles just by asking that question. So if you continue to read this story, you'll see that God saves all of his people through Gideon and a tiny army, which is a miracle in of itself. But none of that would have happened unless God made this little miracle happen in his invitation to Gideon in the first place. Because Gideon focuses on where he is weak, God is able to display where he is strong. He invites Gideon to be this mighty warrior, but Gideon looks at himself and sees weakness. He looks at himself through this negative filter. And God's response is, I will be with you. And more than that, I'm going to prove that to you over and over again. I think another thing I really enjoy about this story is if you have kids in your life and they ask you the same question over and over and over again, eventually, if you're like me, you're going to be like, I answered you the same thing. Like, you can either choose to believe my answer that I told you 3 times or not. And so God could have done this with Gideon because God said, you're going to be a mighty warrior. Gideon said, prove it over and over again. Prove it. Show it to me that this is going to happen. And God continues to prove that to Gideon. When Gideon doubts, God reassures. When we doubt ourselves, God can come through too. And so this story invites us to do a couple different things. I think it really invites us to change the filter that we see ourselves through. If you're someone that tends to look at yourself and focus on the areas where you're weak, we can learn a lot from this story. Because God tends to look at us through this filter of all that we can be and all that he can do through us. We just can't see it. He shows us that he works miracles through invitations. And as we've been talking about inviting others the past several weeks, we've been talking about growing together in community. I think it's important that we remind ourselves of a story like Gideon's, of how important it is to accept these invitations from God so that we can see his strength in that. So over the past few weeks, we've been talking about inviting and living in community. But I think if we're honest, when God challenges us to do something big, we tend to focus or look at ourselves through this negative filter. Whether you're asking somebody on a first date, asking a new couple to join a small group with you, or even asking someone new to sit with you at lunch, I think our weaknesses sometimes start to creep in, and we focus on the results of that invitation. We think, what if they say no? What if they have better people to sit with? Or what if they're going to think of me differently just by asking this? When in reality, we don't need to worry about what becomes of the invitation. We're just simply challenged to invite and believe that God is working a miracle in that question. Over the past month, I've gotten to see a miracle in my own life as a result of an invitation. And so back in 2011, one of the staff at the church I was at the time felt challenged to start a youth group. And so his name's Eric, and so he and my parents and a couple of others started this team, and they just decided to start a teen hangout on Friday nights at our church. And just a little bit about this church, it was very, the congregation was a lot older, and so this was going to be very new to have a lot of teenagers running around the building. But this is what they felt invited by God to do, was start this group to meet on Friday nights and simply play games together. And so they did. They responded to that invitation. And knowing Eric before this, I'm sure that invitation brought doubts to him. He did not live a perfect adolescence, and so at times, I'm sure he questioned God, because this could be a little nerve-wracking to try to start something for teens that come from rough backgrounds, kind of like how he grew up. But God gave Eric that invitation to simply invite teenagers to come play games, and countless teens were introduced to Jesus through that. Several months ago, in my own life, I found myself in a season where I really struggled to read the Bible. And I hated admitting that to myself and to others, because I think as a follower of Jesus, I should be excited to read the Bible. I should be excited to pull out this giant book and read words that I don't understand. But I found myself in a season where I really struggled to do that. And so I would read the Bible for work. As we're figuring out what we're doing in Kid XP on Sundays, I'd read the Bible for my homework. As I'm going through my ministry degree, I'd go to small group in the evenings. We'd read the Bible there. And then I'd come home, and I just didn't want to touch it. It would just sit there on my desk because I really struggled to want to read on my own. And so right around this season is when our church staff and some of our key volunteers, we go on this trip every year to a conference. And this is a place where I feel especially close to God when we're there. And so while I was there, I felt like God was saying, I need you to get back into my word. But this time, I don't want you to do it alone. And I think sometimes that makes a huge difference, is not doing things alone. So I'm walking around this church that the conference is at, and I find this devotional that I decide I'm going to buy. And I think this is what's going to help me get back into my Bible reading. And something about me is I'm a little cheap. So I found this $7 devotional, and I think, perfect, I can do that. But I felt like God was saying, no, I want you to buy 2 of them. So I thought, okay, well, now we're paying $14, but we're going to buy this devotional and trust that God is going to use 2 of them to help me read the Bible again. Now, while we were on this trip, I also felt God nudge me to grow closer in my friendship with Lexi. And so we got to know each other a little better on this trip, and when we got back, I decided to invite her to go get breakfast. So we got talking and got to know each other a little better. And when I got home, I saw the 2 devotionals, and I thought, I think God is challenging me to invite Lexi to do this devotional together, for her to hold me accountable to read the Bible. And so I start thinking about how I'm going to ask her, and it took me weeks to figure out how I was going to invite her to do this very simple task. My husband got to the point where he said, "What's the worst that can happen? You're just asking her to read with you." But I was nervous, and so I eventually asked her, and she said yes. And we've been meeting almost every week since, reading the Bible and talking about it every morning or once a week for breakfast. And it was my relationship with God that challenged me to invite Lexi to do this. And she holds me accountable for that. Now, it was Lexi's relationship with God that I think she got an even bigger challenge because God challenged her to chaperone our middle school CIY trip, or middle school camp during the summer. And while she was there, she grew in her relationship with one of our middle school girls and has been pouring into her each week. And so it's been amazing to hear, especially yesterday at our breakfast devotional. She said, "I actually shared a devotional book with this student." And so my invitation invited Lexi to grow in her relationship with God, who now pours into one of our middle school students. And that middle school student now serves in Kid XP and teaches some of our youngest church members about Jesus. So if I hadn't taken that invitation, I wonder if my relationship with God would be where it is, and would I be able to see these responses? Now, what I didn't tell you is back in 2011, when Eric started this youth group, I was a part of that youth group, and it started in September of 2011, which was the same month that CrossPoint would have celebrated their first anniversary, or best Sunday ever. And so I stand here 11 years later to tell you that God works miracles and invitations. God invited Eric, who invited me, who invited Lexi, who invited Claire, who invites Ben, one of our 3-year-olds, learning in his classroom right now, to look past our weaknesses and see how God can work in our lives. And so today, I feel like those of us that are listening, whether you're here in the room or online, I think God challenges us to change the filter that we see ourselves through. If you're somebody that focuses on where you're weak or where you lack, I think sometimes we simply just need to flip that filter and see ourselves the way God sees us for all that we can be, and simply invite other people to be a part of all that God is doing. If Gideon hadn't invited others into battle when God invited him to lead this, Israel and God's people may not have been saved, which means we wouldn't be able to worship here freely today. Next Sunday, if you heard the announcements this morning, next Sunday we celebrate CrossPoint's 12-year anniversary. And so we're celebrating all that God has done through CrossPoint's ministries for 12 years. And I believe he has great things in store in the future as well for you, for our church, and for our community. And when we begin to believe that, we want to invite others to be a part of it. So today, I want to invite you to respond in a couple different ways. You might be sitting here thinking, man, there's somebody in my life that they really just focus on the negative about themselves. Like, I wish they would just see themselves the way that God sees them. Because I think when they flip that filter, they're going to be able to see how God can work in their life. And so if there's somebody that comes to mind like this in your life, I'm just going to challenge you to make one simple ask. It could be either inviting them to sit with you in church next Sunday. It could be as simple as watching online, or even just asking them to pray for all that God is going to do through our church anniversary and beyond. For those of us that maybe somebody doesn't come to mind, I wonder if maybe you're the person that needs to accept the invitation to see yourself in a new light today. I know that I found myself in times where I just need to see myself the way God sees me. And so today, I want you to think, if this is you, that you need to accept an invitation this morning, to ask God, what is one way you can do that this week? And once you have that response in mind, whether it's a person in your life or whether it's something that you need to work on, I just invite you to join me in prayer. God, I thank you so much for this story of Gideon and this invitation that you gave him to step out and be a part of something bigger. I thank you that even though he saw himself through a negative filter, that we are able to see your strength in the midst of it. And I just ask that if somebody came to mind in our life today that just needs to experience you, that you'd give us the courage to invite them to join us in some way next week. And God, if I'm that person that needs to accept that invitation this morning, I just pray for all the people in the room and that are listening right now, that you would just challenge them to see themselves the way you see them today. Thank you, and we love you. In your name we pray. Amen.
I invite you to stand and sing with me again. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. I got joy. And I've still got joy in chaos. I've got peace that makes no sense, so I won't be going under. I'm not held by my own strength, 'cause I build my life on Jesus. 'Cause he's never let me down. He's faithful in every season. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand, and everything around me is shaking. And I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why should he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. Rain came when, but my house was built on house was built on you. Christ is my firm foundation, the rock on which I stand when everything around me is shaking. I've never been more glad that I put my faith in Jesus, 'cause he's never let me down. He's faithful through generations. So why would he fail now? He won't. He won't. He won't fail. He won't fail. No, he won't.
If you need prayer, in the back right of the room is the cross, and we will have people there to pray with you. We thank you guys for joining us today. Make sure to bring somebody next week for the best Sunday ever, and if you'll look at the screens for a little sneak peek of what's in store.